Welcome back to the Courtroom. I'm Terry Darrell Caldwell. We have examined white, a political coalition disguised as biology; black, a circular definition enforced by ideological gatekeepers; MENA, a category that took nearly 50 years to be recognized, proving the system runs on administrative convenience, not evidence. Today, we turn to a category that contains over 20 million Americans, representing dozens of distinct ethnic groups, languages, religions, and immigration histories. What is Asian? The prosecution would demonstrate that the Asian category is a statistical fiction, a bureaucratic convenience that lumps together populations with vastly different outcomes, hides severe disparities, and serves as a vehicle for the model minority myth, which is then used to dismiss the claims of other groups. Let us begin. The Office of Management and Budget defines Asian as a person having origins in any of the original peoples of the Far East, Southeast Asia, or the Indian subcontinent, including, for example, Cambodia, China, India, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Pakistan, the Philippine Islands, Thailand, and Vietnam. Notice the scope. This single category includes East Asians, Chinese, Japanese, Korean; Southeast Asians, Vietnamese, Cambodian, Hmong, Laotian, Thai, Filipino; South Asians, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan, Nepalese. These groups have different languages, different religions, different immigration histories, different socioeconomic profiles, and different health outcomes. Yet the government treats them as a single race. Let the prosecution present the evidence. According to the Census Bureau's own data, the median household income for Asian Indians is approximately $150,000. The median household income for Burmese Americans is approximately $44,000. Hmong Americans have poverty rates nearly 3 times the national average. Chinese Americans have high educational attainment, but also high rates of mental health distress. Filipino Americans have high rates of hypertension and cardiovascular disease. Japanese Americans have high rates of longevity, but also a history of forced removal and incarceration. These are not minor variations. They are gulfs in income, education, and health outcomes. Yet all these groups are collapsed into a single checkbox. Why? Because OMB Directive 15 categories were designed for administrative convenience, not for capturing lived reality. The prosecution is not arguing that the government should create a separate box for every ethnicity. The prosecution is arguing that if the Asian category is so heterogeneous as to be meaningless, then the entire classification system is a statistical fraud. The Asian category is not just imprecise, it is actively weaponized. The model minority myth holds that Asian Americans succeed through hard work, family values, and cultural discipline, implying that other minority groups fail because they lack these virtues. This myth is deployed both by the left and the right. The right uses it to argue that racism is not a barrier to success. If Asians can make it, why can't blacks? The left uses it to dismiss Asian concerns about affirmative action discrimination. Asians are overrepresented in elite universities. They don't need help. Both arguments rely on a false homogeneity. They treat Asian as a single, uniformly successful group. They ignore the poverty of Hmong and Cambodian communities. They ignore the workplace discrimination faced by South Asian Muslims. They ignore the mental health crisis among Japanese and Korean youth. The model minority myth is not a compliment, it is a cudgel. And the government's classification system provides the raw material for that cudgel. The prosecution submits that a government that flattens diverse populations into a single successful category is not fighting racism. It is enabling it. Before the model minority myth, there was the yellow peril. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was the first federal law to explicitly ban immigration based on race. The Immigration Act of 1924 barred virtually all Asian immigration. Japanese Americans were forcibly removed from their homes and incarcerated in camps during World War II without due process, without evidence of disloyalty. As recently as the 1980s, Vincent Shin, a Chinese American, was beaten to death by white auto workers who blamed Japan for the decline of the U.S. auto industry. The prosecution does not recite this history to evoke sentiment. We recite it to establish a pattern. The same groups that were once excluded as unassimilable and now held up as model minorities. What changed? Not their DNA, not their culture. The political needs of the dominant society changed. During the Cold War, the United States needed to contrast its racial progress with the Soviet Union. Successful Asian immigrants became proof that America was not racist. The model minority was a propaganda tool. Today, that tool is still in use. In the government's classification system, lumping together all Asians into a single box makes the tool possible. The prosecution notes a revealing historical detail. In the 1977 Directive 15, the category was Asian or Pacific Islander. Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders objected. They argued that their status as indigenous peoples with a unique political relationship to the United States was being submerged under a geographic label. In 1997, OMB split the category into Asian and Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. Why? Not because of new science about genetic differences, because of political pressure from Native Hawaiian advocates. The prosecution is not criticizing the split. The point is that the categories change when political pressure mounts. The same logic that gave us a separate Pacific Islander category could justify dozens of more granular categories, but the OMB stops where political convenience dictates. The system is not rational, it is negotiated. Today, Asian American advocacy groups are demanding disaggregation, the collection of data on subgroups within the Asian category. They argue that without disaggregated data, health disparities, educational gaps, and economic hardships are hidden. The prosecution agrees with them, but the prosecution asks a deeper question. If the Asian category is so imprecise that it requires constant demands for disaggregation, why have the category at all? The answer is inertia. The category exists because it has always existed, and it will continue to exist until the entire system is abolished. We have discussed the Nazi honorary Aryan Declaration for Japan. Consider the irony. During World War II, while Japanese Americans were imprisoned in camps, Nazi Germany was declaring the Japanese Empire honorary Aryans. The same people, Japanese, were treated as subhuman by one white supremacist regime and as honorary whites by another. Race is not biology. Race is a diplomatic variable. If the Nazis could flip a switch and change the racial classification of an entire nation, then the American government's refusal to disaggregate Asian categories is not a scientific necessity. It is a choice, and choices can be unmade. Now, the prosecution asks the jury to consider a simple question. If the Asian category lumps together groups with wildly different incomes, health outcomes, and immigration histories, if it is used to weaponize the model minority myth against other groups, and if the government has changed the category before splitting off Pacific Islanders when pressured, then on what authority does the government ask any citizen to check that box? The answer is the same as for white, black, and MENA. No authority, only habit, only inertia, only the convenience of bureaucrats who do not want to redesign the forms. The prosecution does not deny that Asian Americans face discrimination, but the response to discrimination should not be to flatten their diversity into a single checkbox that serves only as a political tool. In our next episode, we will examine what is Native American, the unique political status of tribes, the distinction between tribal citizenship and racial classification, and the way the government's race box often misrepresents indigenous identity. But for today, the prosecution rests on count 5. The Asian category is a statistical fiction. It hides severe disparities, fuels the model minority myth, and lumps together populations with distinct histories of exclusion and success. The government has changed the categories before when pressured. It can abolish it as well. If the third largest racial category in the United States is a bureaucratic convenience rather than a coherent biological or social reality, then the entire classification system collapses. And that collapse is not a tragedy, it is an opportunity. Court will reconvene for episode 6. What is Native American?